Good evening. Today is Monday, December 18th, 2023. It is 7 p.m. I'd like to call the regular Board of Selectmen's meeting to order.
Stephen Sedlak.
Troy Lemire.
Paul Marino. Bob Geiger.
Todd Archelashi.
Glenn Albanesius.
William Hester.
Andy Perez.
William Pozo.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Agenda review.
I would like to change something. I would like to make a motion to remove the executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
Was there a reason for pulling it?
Based on recommendations from the town attorney. Sorry, I should have put that in.
No, that's fine. I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
Oh, so is
Six.
that something that you said we should do out, because we can make an agenda item in the open?
Right, we want to just remove executive session for now.
Okay, but not discuss the
No.
topic in public?
Not at this meeting, unless someone wants to add it. Are you still an abstain, or?
Yeah, so abstaining.
Okay, so 6:01.
Mr. Mayor, also, I move that we move item 11A right after citizens' comments.
Move item A, or
11A.
11A up to after item 5. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table the board nominations till we have time to review the policies and procedures on receiving and reviewing the applications. I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. Any discussion? Candy?
Are any of them needed for quorums? Sometimes on some of the boards, they need people to be there for quorums. So like reappointments of John Pollock on zoning board of appeals might be a good thing to do for his reappointment, because I know that they have a small commission. And so, and Paul just got off, so they may need him on that. The resignations you could act on. Putting people,
Bill, can you amend your motion to table consideration, nominations, and appointments, and allow reappointments
And resignations.
and resignations? Is that what you,
Yeah, I'll modify that to allow that.
got that correct? Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous? Moving on to item 4, the approval of minutes of a regular meeting on December 4th.
I move that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of December 4th.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Discussion, corrections, additions? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous? Moving on to item 5, citizens' comments. The Board of Selectmen welcomes public comments. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes or less and may speak once. Does anyone wish to speak? Seeing none, moving on to new business. The discussion of the armed security officer at the Gilbert School. I'd like to welcome up to the microphone, Head of School, Greg Sharroot.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. In your packet, there is a letter or a memo that I drafted on December 13 that kind of encapsulates where we've been going, but I tried to put it as succinctly as possible. We have been busy. This is, I have another document I'd like to share with you to kind of lead us in our conversation. Steve, I'll just pass it to you. So, again, I think I tried to capture where we've been in the letter that's included in your packet, and a sample of a job description, and the MOU that's in sample and draft form. But I also just wanted to talk about timeline, and I'm not gonna read all this documentation to you, but I just wanted to use it for reference. I just wanted to stress and kind of put it in context. And again, Mayor, I apologize for the redundancy. You've heard this, but I just think it's important for everyone to know that this is not something that just has come up on our radar and we just started talking about it. In fact, we've been dealing with this issue since August of 2022. So we're 16 months into this conversation, where we've had conversations with our former town manager, former chief, since April when the new chief has been on. We've had multiple meetings. I've had conversations with other area superintendents. We've had guest speakers in at the board. So I think it's important to just make sure it's in context. And one of the things that's important to note is that, again, back in September of 2022, we really started thinking about, in August of 2020, we started talking about having a school resource officer versus an armed security officer. And we'll talk just a moment about the difference. But at that particular time, when we talked to Chief Fitzgerald, one of the issues that he was discussing and the problems that we had was twofold. From him and Josh Kelly, our former town manager, was one, first and foremost, was the shortage in police officers within the department of the Winchester Police Department, and two, the overall cost of a school resource officer. At that particular time, we were quoted a price with benefits and insurance and salaries of about $150,000, and it would be the school's responsibility to pay 10/12 of that. So that's where we were. We started to think about other alternatives, along with Melanie Brady. We were in conversations with her. Holly Cassidy, our board chair, Doug Fenninger, their board chair, and we started talking about other alternatives, one being an armed security officer, and started doing more research on that, and the similarities and the differences of those, and basically you can get an armed security officer for about a third of the cost, okay? I think it's important to note that these are mandated by state statutes. I'm not talking about, Blart the mall cop type of person. We're talking about a trained professional. More than likely, they are retired police officers, so they understand the situation. So that was our last fall. We were moving in that direction. We had guest speakers into the Board of Education, former SRO, and author of the school resource officer. But then we started having some questions and some dialogue within our board about the mental health issues. And some of the things when you read, about school violence, school shootings in particular, is the mental health of the assailant. And one of the things we started really diving into was the mental health picture of our student population. And we are seeking data from our school our school social workers and our school counselors. And the data that we found was rather alarming. We had students in mental health crisis. Our police officers, our ambulances were coming to the school on a far too regular basis for students really contemplating self-harm and other issues. So it was in January of this year, 2023, that our school corp decided to pivot from a budgetary standpoint. Instead of putting in for an armed security officer, and really move towards a school social worker to start taking a more proactive and progressive look at our mental health, and to do something in less triage and more proactive programming. We were fortunate that went into the budget and passed. We were also very fortunate in the spring that there was a grant that came that made it available from the state of Connecticut that we were able to apply and get a third social worker. And that grant is with us for 3 years. So now I'm happy to say that, less visits from the police department and ambulance on a weekly basis. I think our mental health and our approach to mental health is more proactive. We've got proactive programming, groups, things of that nature, as opposed to just triaging events. So now we've come full circle. right? So now we've come about a year, and we still have to address the issue of security, which I think is paramount. So what I needed you to kind of, I was hoping to frame this conversation so you understand the timeline and the context of kind of how we've been doing business and what we've been doing. It's no secret, I've met with the chief many times. He's been an invaluable resource during this conversation. I think, and it is no secret, I think if it was up to him and he had the police force, that he'd prefer a school resource officer as opposed to an armed security officer. I think we would too, but there's two major obstacles, like I said earlier. One is the vacancies that he currently has and the anticipated vacancies that he's planning on having after the first of the year, and the difficulty it is in hiring police officers. And I think it's also important to note that a major obstacle is the cost, which when we were just presented with an insurance update, right off the bat, we know the insurance is going to go up 11.6% across the board for our health and our dental insurances, for us and the other school districts in the area. So we know that we're incurring some costs, so we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. So what I've done on the second page of that handout that I passed out is I've drafted some similarities and some differences between an ASO and an SRO. I think the main difference, obviously, is that this is it is an employee of the school and not the town. Its focus is on security, whereas it's not law enforcement, it's security. It's in the event that should an intruder come, as school personnel are going into a lockdown situation, this individual is going towards the crisis. I remember having a conversation early on last August of 2022, and a person in the meeting said, well, it's really not necessary because, you know, we have the police department that's 5 minutes away. And I said, well, 5 minutes, tell that to the people at Sandy Hook what 5 minutes does. So I think my goal is to promote safety and to encourage safety and to have an individual that can help us in the event of a threat. Again, I'm not going to read all this to you, but training is mandated by the state. They work in concert with our police department relative to firearms training, but there's other mandated training that it would be the expense of the school to send the individual to. And they truly are viewed as a part of the school community. And again, just the rationale, if you take a look, again, I put some charts and some graphs, and the numbers are alarming, but it's just the data is really alarming. That you know, it's unfortunate that in this day and age, unless there seems to be mass casualties, school shootings aren't even making the news any longer. And I've provided a host of data for you. As of December 14th, there were 1,089 gun-related incidents on school campuses in 2023 alone. So again, I'm not going to go into all the data, but the goal here for the next step to move in this process and why I'm here tonight is twofold. And I'm not asking for anything to be signed tonight, but it's probably more philosophical to see if where we are in this topic. Ultimately, if to move in the next direction, we would have to have an MOU signed that would allow us by state statutes to move forward in this and to ultimately hire an armed security officer. There is a draft of that in your packet. Obviously, I just want to talk about some of the documents that the chief and I have reviewed. I've reviewed them with the mayor. One of the things that in my research I have found is that after Sandy Hook and talking with the superintendent and their head of security there, that obviously there was an enormous amount of resources, both in resources and funds put forth for school security. So if you look in the area towns, and I mentioned these area towns in our letter that's included in your packet. So one of the things that's important to note that our request is not unusual. We are not charting new waters here. In fact, School districts 1, 6, 10, 15, 16, Litchfield, Watertown, all have ASOs. Region 20 will have an ASO in the fall when they come on board. And, you know, Berlin, Derby, Easton, Reading, Monroe, there are many, many more school districts that have ASOs. So this is not, like I said, uncharted ground. But one of the things that I found in my research is that the documents, whether it be job descriptions, whether it be school policy, whether it be this MOU, and any other documents, whether they're handbooks and so on and so forth, are very boilerplate. It sounds like many of them were produced by the people at Newtown post Sandy Hook, and now other districts have adopted similar documents. Obviously, you know, legal counsel would need to tweak them and make them germane to our district, but I think it's important to note that, you know, this stuff is, it's rather boilerplate now, and obviously can be tweaked to suit our needs. So I've spoken far too long, but I felt it was necessary to kind of encapsulate where we're coming from and where we're trying to head to, and I'd be more than welcome to take any questions that you have at this point.
Questions from the board?
My question actually is for the chief. I know we have a way to go for staffing, and it's clearly on your agenda as well as Mr. Geiger and everybody on the board to make sure we get a solution to staffing for the police department. So my question is, if we have a full complement, and I believe the number is 18 officers, is that what full complement is?
We're authorized for 21 sworn officers, including myself.
Okay. If we get the full complement, during the school year, would we be able to staff an SRO at Gilbert School without adding potentially any additional cost?
Possibly. I'm not sure that the 21 authorized positions we have now is adequate.
Well, let me help them out. There's no way to add another officer without paying for it. So it's cost. I'm just
Yeah, but
saying.
my question is, if we already have 18, 20, whatever the number is on staff, is that enough staffing to provide during the school day an SRO at Gilbert School?
21 officers, probably not. We'd have to increase to about 23 to have 21 on staff.
Okay.
We're always behind. It's 40 weeks to hire an officer, 26 at the academy, 14 field training. If we have a retirement, 40 weeks, we have a vacancy. So
We've always got some coming and going. So if we're staffed fully at 20 and we need to add one more for an SRO, that's one additional. Any way we look at it, it's one additional. So the issue is, if we want to give you an officer, either you pay for it or we pay for it. That's where it's boiling down to, right?
Well,
Either
and
you
that's-
pay
and
for it or
that-
we pay for it.
And that was the discussion that we had back in August of 2022 with Chief Fitzgerald and Josh Kelly. And basically, and again, you can check the numbers, the number was a round figure of $150,000.
Yeah, that's about right, I'm
For officer benefits, salaries, and so on and so forth, and that's when it was determined that, listen, if the good school's gonna be, if the officer's gonna be at your school full-time, then you need to pay 10/12 of the salary, and they were gonna employ that officer in the 2 summer months doing something else that would be, you know, specific to the town. So that's kind of how I use that number when you're asking.
Well, we've been talking about this before I had left for a couple of years. So this is about year 4 we're talking about. I don't deny what's going on out there in the world and the need for an SRO. I don't deny that at all. We're just down to how we're going to budget that.
It seems to me that the SRO is a far more valuable option than the armed security officer. The relationship that a full-time police officer in the school can build with the kids, help them understand law enforcement and the benefit and the positive part of law enforcement is a huge part for me in this decision. And your ASO is simply an armed guard in case something bad happens, as where an SRO develops relationships and really is part of the community of the school. So I don't know.
I agree with you. I mean, if in an ideal world, yes, but I think you're minimizing the role of the ASO. I've talked to many districts that have, and the ASO is a key component to the staff. So they do make relationships. They're coaches, they're mentors in the school. So they're just not an armed security. They do perform other functions and they develop relationship with students. But I do agree with you, Senator Marino, that in an ideal situation, It all depends on the right person too, because over 25-plus years, I've worked with some incredibly effective SROs, and I've worked with a few that weren't as effective, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at your comparisons, and the ASO is primarily securing the building from threats, and as opposed to the other, the SRO, you talked about community engagement in the educational setting. So I just think there's a huge value to that. Whether we can get it into the budget or make it work with staffing, I don't know the answer to that. We have to discuss it, but
I agree.
I think that's a huge benefit to the SRO.
Sure, I agree with you.
Just so you all know, when I worked at Northwestern, up the hill over there, we had what we called a school resource officer. So I just want to clarify, Greg, and so that we're all talking about the same thing here, because I think we're talking about three different things. An armed security guard does one thing. School resource officer that we had is a retired police officer, less cost than a full-time police officer. So I think we have,
I'm not.
you're not talking
No,
about.
I'm not, because I don't
A
know.
school resource officer is then a
Yes.
full-fledged police officer.
That's what, yes. As SRO
So,
is an employee
but
of the Winchester, would be an employee of the Winchester Police
Because
Department.
there are three things that schools do. The armed security guards, the school resource officer, which is hired by the school like Northwestern did, which is a Constable Larry with Barkhamsted.
Well, I think that depends on the nature of the town, so like,
Right.
because it's a regional school system and a constable and so forth, it differs, but.
Right, because his cost is not near what a full
Right.
$150,000 police officer was, but he did have the ability to, deal with the thefts, the fights, everything. He was a sworn police officer, although he was retired, so. So his cost was a little bit different than a full-fledged police officer.
Troy?
Yeah, that was my question. This kind of probably have to go to the chief. So the difference between SRO to ASO would obviously be arresting capabilities. So what kind of power would the ASO have in the school for, like, they catch kids with drugs or?
They don't have any.
So they'd still have to come to the PD to get that taken care of?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
That's right, yes.
Any other questions? Unfortunately, I think it's the day that we live in, it's a necessary evil. So I think we do need to do something at some point in the very near future. Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Holly.
Is that something that the memorandum of agreement can go to the attorneys now? Because if we're gonna vote on it at some point or agree to it, we're gonna ask for that to happen anyway. Because it's gonna go in the budget, right? So it's gonna be in the
Right.
budget as a request.
Yes.
Which is gonna come to this board anyway in March. So if we're gonna approve it, then maybe, you had mentioned having it reviewed.
I have no problem sending this to our legal counsel. I would imagine that the town would want to do the same.
Because otherwise, we're gonna come back, and then everybody's gonna say, yes, let's do it. And then we're gonna have to go out to legal anyway, right?
Correct, that's how I envision it, yes.
And just, it should be the town manager signing it, not myself.
Okay. You got it.
So if you can send that copy to Bob.
Absolutely. And there again, based on the charter, things are different, right? So certain towns,
We're this town, the town manager's the CEO. so-
there you go. I will amend it. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
And again, thank you for bringing us moving me to the top of the agenda. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Moving on to item number 6, town manager's report.
Well, the big topic of the day has been the storm. It seems like we were a bit graced relative to our surrounding towns. We had some minor damage, a few trees down. We had we've got over 800 storm drains, so we had a few that weren't able to handle the capacity temporarily, but Jimmy's group seems to have accommodated everybody pretty well. There were originally over 100 power outages, which most were corrected within a couple of hours. The last few, it was reported to me that they were completed by noontime. If anyone's out there who's still without a power, make sure you let us know, but I think everything's been covered. On the way in tonight, I saw a lot of the public service trucks and electrical trucks who were just double checking around town, but I saw no one actually up on a lift repairing anything. So it looks our region really escaped pretty well. As I listened to the news earlier, some other towns were not as fortunate as we were. So we happened to luck out on this last one. That was the major issue today. And as far as, there's a lot of things in your packet here that we spent a lot of time on that we were going to discuss a little bit today. So I'll just report that the past several days has gone unremarkably calm, as we'll have a report from our finance director here. We've already started working on the budgets, thinking them through at the first level. I'm also been communicating with our town's attorney as we're finishing up a police union contract. I hope to have that done probably in the middle of January is our anticipation. I think that's about the gist of it. In your packet, and here you will see in more detail, which in terms of, we'll get out to the public later as some of these come to conclusion. But we made it through the storm. That was the big deal. Any questions relative to where we are right now as we begin to close out the year? No?
Thank you, Bob. Moving on to item number 7 on the agenda, Finance Director's Report.
Before we start, let me make one more comment. I meant to compliment Lori Hall. I don't know if you noticed that we had a ceremony last week to acknowledge veterans from the Korean War and the Korean War era, and also the Vietnam era. It was put on by Susan Beisowitz out of Hartford. Terry Hall really did all of the work in inviting all the veterans from both of those categories. We had a service at the Senior Center for the Korean War vets, and at the school for the Vietnam era vets. And they received citations from the Lieutenant Governor, and I think it was well recognized. It seemed to be well appreciated. And Terry did a lot of work. She was awesome. Thank you.
All set.
Good evening. These are your general fund results, financial report for November 30th of 2023. Glenn is going to get me a new microphone at some point, right? We are 42% into our fiscal year. Our current property taxes year-to-date, $15,314,086. We are 57.61% of budgeted revenue. In comparison to $14,928,060, which was 58.53 for the same period last year. Our past due tax collections year-to-date, $167,454, which is 55.82% of the budgeted number, compared to $231,814 for the same period last year, which was 77.27% of budget. Total year-to-date revenue is $19,699,320. We're just a little over 50%, in comparison to $18,477,715, which was 51.23%. Total expenditures year-to-date, and this is just for the new Board of Selectmen members, this is expenditures without encumbrances, $16,655,749, which is 47.57% of the budget, in comparison to $13,829,876, which is 38.36% of the budget. You will notice that that is significantly higher than the same period last year. The majority of that is due to a timing difference. This year we have booked the full year of our transfers out that are budgeted. Last year we did not book those. I think we actually booked those towards the end of the year. We have booked the full amount of our transfers out for the full year. Cash flow at October 30th, which is the last month completed by our treasurer, $20,622,689. Of that, $16,387,542 has been invested. $996,255 is with the Northwest Community Sweep account, $2,354,332 with STIF, and $13,036,955 with the Northwest Community Bank Money Market Fund. November 2023 capital expenditures, we spent $288,888 on Case Avenue. We spent an additional $12,864 for our last plow truck lease, which was an additional payment to bring us up to what the actual ended up being slightly above the budget. $35,901 on our annual road maintenance, $8,330 at Tetros Pond, And then a couple of the bond projects, $358,387 on Marshall Street and $486,227 on our Case Avenue Bridge project. Questions?
No questions from the board?
I will just mention also that, yes, as the town manager did mention, the budget packets did go out to the department heads. I believe that Tom is going to be doing a little teaching session to tell everybody how to go through. He did do some revisions to our templates, so that everybody will get those back to him in working order so that he doesn't have to do a lot of extra work. And once all of those come back in, we will be starting the review of the budget. That's it.
Thank you. Item 8, correspondence. Does anyone have anything in correspondence? Moving on to item 9, can we have the reappointments and the resignations? Steve?
Okay, thank you, Todd. A reappointment, first of all, I would move that we reappoint John Pollock as a member of the ZBA, a regular member, term to end in December of 2028.
Second?
Thank you, Paul. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
And we're going to accept again Troy Lemire's resignation. I think we did it unofficially, now we have all the paperwork in place. How many years?
BA two, the other one was zoning, board. We
Got-
had the zoning board, that's why there's two of them.
Gotcha, but this was a 2-year appointment here.
Alternate.
Well, again, all of these people, including Colleen Garrity, member of the Retirement Administration Board, and Joe Lemlin, a member of the Housing Authority, should be thanked for their service to the community, so thank you very much. Is that what we're limited to?
Yes, sir.
Are you gonna have that meeting when? Bill, you made a motion to change the appointments, so when is that meeting? You wanna have a meeting to review things?
Yeah, I'd like to bring this back up, probably the first meeting in January.
No, but what did you say? You said you wanted to have a meeting because there's a review committee for boards and commissions, right? So that
Well,
would
I
be,
said I wanted time to review the policies and procedures on,
right, so that would be with Steve, you, and there was one other person
Me,
that.
me,
Yeah.
Steve, and Bill are
So-
supposed to be vetting people, so.
Right, so the three of you will meet before that?
Correct.
Okay.
so I can email you, Steve, and we'll set up a time that's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just, I assume you tabled all those.
Moving on to item number 10, unfinished business. Item A, 23-73C, consider and possibly act on the Historic Commission ordinance amendment.
All right, let me, this was a final adoption, the final change for the ordinance regarding the Historical Commission. The town of Winchester recently added an ordinance creating a Historical Commission. The requested change to this ordinance that would allow property owners, not just residents, to serve on this board has been completed. I would ask the Board of Selectmen to put forward this amendment to the Historical Commission ordinance. This would be the final adoption of this change ordinance since all 3 meetings have been held. So I ask the Board of Selectmen adopt the approved ordinance changes to allow residents and property owners to sit on this commission.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Troy. Discussion?
Yeah, were they posted on our website?
I don't know. I'll have to find out tomorrow morning.
Because I'm looking at the
The
website
finals were, the
now.
finals should have been.
Huh?
I think the finals were. You mean the 3rd meeting? Or for the
Well,
suggested
they're
changes?
supposed to be listed for the public under, like, instead of putting the legal notice online, we're supposed to put it on the website. We've been through this conversation just a few months ago about this. So I'm just looking now to see if we have, Glenn, do you know?
I don't. Alexa's in charge of.
But doesn't somebody, she wouldn't know that we passing these things along, so how would she know to post them?
I believe she posted, I don't know.
Did
if
Josh start it?
This was, yes. So we can back up to find
No,
out.
but did he put it on, because we talked to him?
guess I'll have to find out.
Yep, we'll have to look.
I'm looking for it, I don't see it.
My apologies.
Well, I mean, you know, because if, that's what we had discussed before, was about the movement of when we say it's moving for the first time, the second time, and moving through, whether or not it gets posted or not, and whether it's posted under, on the bottom of our website, it's called legal notices. There's also one charter ordinances and regulations, you know, to post the, like a change or whatnot.
Right.
So I might have to wait till the next meeting, because you have to put it online.
I don't think that'll make a big difference. We can make sure that that's done.
Well, it shouldn't make a difference.
No. I'll make sure it's posted before, and you can approve it the next time. Let me put that out.
I mean, I could be missing it, but
It might be, and I don't know.
There's one, the cultural district on there.
it would have been put on like a couple meetings ago. But, like, this is our third time, so it would have been the second meeting in November.
Right.
At least the first meeting in December. Because then after this stuff, it has to sit for 15 days, and then it becomes ordinance. But if it's not on the website for people to see it, or it
Yep.
wasn't put in the paper, then it's, then it wasn't listed for the correct part for the ordinance. All right, well, I guess we'll do it next time, or whenever you decide.
Okay.
Yeah, just see the driveway and the
Yep, so
cultural commission.
we'll go into the driveway.
Yeah, so can we have a motion to table item 23-73C upon further investigation? So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous. Item B, remaining board liaisons appointments. Does anyone else have any commissions to add themselves to?
You can add me to the Conservation Commission. And then once it's up and running, I'll also do the Historical Commission.
Anyone else? Moving on to item C, 23-60B, consider and possibly act on the removal of the driveway ordinance number 222.
I'll have a handout here on this has been gone over 3 times now by the proper commission in terms of, we have set here new rules and regulations on driveway versus the ordinance. So we're at some point in time here, this should replace that effectively since the commission approved it after all 3 of their meetings. I can give you a handout so you can see the detail here, because it's about 4 pages long. But we're just trying to make it easier for the public for application and continuance of their driveway changes. So I'll just hand this out for, I'd just like for you to consider and possibly act on the removal of the ordinance. We'll probably bring that forward the next time then. So I'll hand this out to you, and that's it for me.
Todd, may I speak?
Yes, Candy?
Is everybody aware of why this is came before us?
Good, give me the history.
You're all set that this was something that the current driveway ordinance sends things to the Board of Selectmen, and everybody felt that it should be better off at the planning and zoning level, so that's why the change.
Having been on the other side of this and gone to wetlands, ZBA, P&Z, I had to come here for the final step to get my driveway approved, and it was just an additional encumbrance upon people. So I think getting it to planning and zoning where they can handle it as part of other applications makes complete sense.
So Bob, where are we in terms of the 2 things moving together, because we have to have something in place?
Well, we have to come up with a recommendation to remove the ordinance. which we should do at the next meeting, and obviously we'll make sure that's posted, but
It is posted, it's been posted on October 2nd and October 16th were the first two meetings, so this could be the third meeting.
third meeting.
But has it been posted for zoning or posted for us? Because we're doing two,
This is from the Board of Selectmen. So this is for us
so
to
it was
amend
on our
section.
agenda before?
According to the legal notice on the website, it is the intent of the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Winchester, Connecticut to amend Section 222 driveway ordinance. The second meeting for consideration on this ordinance amendment will take place at the Board of Selectmen's meeting on October 2nd, 2023 at 7 PM. The third meeting, which we tabled, was on October 16th. Both meetings will be held at the Winchester Town Hall, 338 Main Street.
So the third meeting was held,
This would be the third meeting.
right.
So the zoning commission just okayed this at
Approved
their
this.
last meeting, which was just
Right,
last
that's why
Monday.
the third meeting was tabled,
Okay.
because we wanted to have that in place before we got rid of our
That
ordinance.
There's a time that when the zoning commission okays something, it has to go through a process there too, no?
It's on the sheet.
It's 45 days or 65 days, I can't remember what it is.
To remove it from, as an ordinance,
To remove it as an ordinance, it's 15 days.
Well, no, that has nothing to do with the zoning board, that they're taking on this responsibility. So when they change their regulations to add driveways.
It's gotta be a P and Z regulation, right?
right, that's what this is.
Correct. So there's a time limit that
So they've
has-
adopted it.
Right. I don't know exactly, it's been a while since I've done this stuff, but I know there's a time limit.
So, Todd, tell me when the Board of Selectmen acted on it.
So on the legal notice,
No, when on our agendas did we?
so it would be October 2nd would be meeting number 2, that agenda.
October 2nd?
October 16th, we tabled it because planning and zoning wasn't done yet. That would have been meeting number 3. And September 19th, I believe, was the meeting before the 2nd of October.
So on October 2nd, I pulled up that agenda, so I didn't see, look at the minutes, but we moved that, and then P and Z has to catch up, or caught up, so they're all set with the reg?
They're all set.
And then how many steps do we have to do to remove ours?
Just the 3.
The same 3? So this meeting will
Same through, this should remove it.
remove it? So this is the final one, removes it.
Right.
And if we remove this, then we adopt the driveway regulations as you
Right,
presented here?
as you presented it, that's the new, that would be the regulation that's followed,
That's
rather
for
than the
planning
ordinance.
and zoning.
Yes.
That's not us approved.
No, no.
That's planning and
We're
zoning.
done with it
Planning-
after tonight.
We're done with it after,
All right, we don't approve planning and zoning regs.
so that's all done. So it's officially a regulation now.
So you still need a motion here to do this?
Unless we didn't, if we didn't remove the ordinance, then that stays in place
Correct.
until. So I have some questions about these regulations before we put them through.
We're not putting them through though, right? We're simply removing our ordinance. These have already been adopted by P and Z.
So P and Z are the ones that makes the decision on the driveway regulations
So
now.
they completed it. They said this is final. They went through their three meetings to finalize this with a lot of input from, you know.
We can't change regulations.
All right, so we'll have a motion, a second, and then we can have the discussion that you would, is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Selectmen recognize this as the third of the 3 public meetings where a removal of ordinance number 222 is approved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion? Bill?
I'm just trying to get some clarity here. If we remove the ordinance, then this takes over. If we don't
Correct.
remove the ordinance, then this does not take over.
The
Correct.
ordinance would supersede the regulation.
One or the other.
Troy?
I was on planning and zoning and went through, there was more than 3 meetings, there had to be a whole year worth of meetings on this. And
We actually started this 4 or 5 years ago, as I
Yeah.
recall.
I mean, to me, it was ridiculous amount of time that was spent on this thing. I still don't agree with the document. I'm no longer on planning and zoning. I believe that there should be no fees. The road foreman, which was part of the reason why the ordinance was gonna be changed, so it would go on planning and zoning, is, if you read the document, is still inspecting almost every aspect of driveways, so that doesn't free him up to do what we need him to do. I made that quite clear in most of the meetings. And the zoning board agreed with me on most of the stuff about the fees, but they decided to put something small in there, which they could do whatever they want. But I've been over this, and I do this for my job, and it is not even close to being this.
Would you like to send it back to planning and zoning?
Well, the planning and zoning has to do their regulations.
They already
So
did, right,
if we
so-
have an objection, we have to go to planning and zoning
Which I
to
did.
object at their meetings.
Not here.
No, I mean, because we can't,
Yeah, I know,
that's
I'm
the
just,
thing with certain of our commissions, we cannot regulate them because they're regulated by state statute. They're not regulated by us. So our driveway ordinance that we have, the purpose for us to take it out is because when driveway ordinances come to us, whoever's sitting here, we don't have the skills and talent of of people that sit on planning and zoning and look at all the, the building regs and the engineering regs and all that kind of stuff. So when somebody comes to us and says, hey, we wanna put in, we just want you to waive the driveway regulations because of slope or whatever it is, then you're sitting here with a bunch of people that don't have that skill level, and that's why we wanna remove it, because it never has made sense.
I agree with that. That was in the past, but that
Right,
is not
so-
the case at this time.
So our work here tonight is simply to say, you're right, the Board of Selectmen doesn't have the skills or whatnot as an overall body, not as individual people on here, because like you clearly have skills in that area. But it would just take that ordinance out from underneath the Board of Selectmen, put it back over at planning and zoning. So planning and zoning drafted a regulation, right? So we take it out from here, we don't have anything more to do with it. And if we don't like what the regulation is, you go to planning and zoning and you ask them to make changes to their regulation. Because there is a way to ask for those to be changed.
So we also have the option to vote no here too, also.
Which means if we don't remove the ordinance, then this doesn't go into effect.
that's correct.
And it goes back to the drawing board.
Well, then there's the big mess that's occurred, because what's happened is over the past, well, it depends on which, Bob can talk about 3 to 4 years, you can talk with us, because Steve and Todd and I were here over this course of time, that said, yeah, it's a good idea to move this ordinance off. So we've moved it off, and we kept going in that direction because we wanted to take it away from the Board of Selectmen, and we've all deemed it that way. And so if you vote the ordinance change down, and then planning and zoning has already adopted their regulations based on the thought that the selectmen wanted to take the ordinance out, then there's gonna be there's a disconnect going on, and there's gonna have to be some more conversation over that.
Well, I think what it would do, if we vote this down, no matter what P and Z said, they'd still have to come back here for our approval, essentially is what would happen. And, whether there's issues in this particular document that you don't always agree with, I can tell you, again, having been a resident who went through this experience, and I happened to come for my driveway approval the night of the road bond, I sat on that bench for 3.5 hours waiting to be new business, so that Jimmy could stand up and go, his driveway is gonna be fine, and you all said fine. So it's definitely doesn't belong on this board.
And I don't disagree with you on that, Paul, but I'm really not happy with pushing this right through the way it is. And the biggest reason, and I went to a couple of these driveway meetings with P and Z when they were working this out too, the last couple. And I thought a lot of this intention was to take a lot of this work off Jim Rollins, again. And I look at this document, and every single page I got, he's gonna inspect the aprons, he's gonna do the final
I talked to
approval
Jimmy, I
of the
said-
driveways, he's gonna,
I talked to Jimmy and said, Jimmy, does this get you over the hump? He says, oh, this makes my life a whole lot easier now that it's no longer an ordinance. So he was thrilled that this is done this way. Is all I can tell you is his response was, we're finally over the hump here.
again, I understand Jimmy saying that, but if down the road, we're not here, there's another Public Works Director. There's still a lot, Public Works is involved in a lot of this procedure. When I just personally feel, and I'm not saying the selectmen should be doing this, absolutely we shouldn't be doing this, but this should fall on
So
on
one
building
thing
and planning.
one thing that comes to mind in terms of enforcement, so planning and zoning wrote the reg, right? These items are what P and Z came up with as what should be in the regulations. Who's gonna do the inspections? It's either gonna be Public Works Director, or,
Zoning officer is gonna be doing the inspections.
so the only thing that comes to mind,
For zoning officer.
the only thing that comes to mind about a zoning officer doing it is these driveways do touch public roads. And therefore, should the Public Works Director be the person who does that inspection because they touch public
Right.
roads?
Right, and that's what I stated in a meeting, that it should be just aprons, that he should be he shouldn't have to go inside the property and do pitches and turnarounds and all that, and he does have that in here. Like I said, the Planning and Zoning Commission didn't write this document. Jimmy Rollins and the engineers wrote this document. They went through it 100 times, and that's where we are today. I am still personally not happy with the document, so I'm not gonna vote for it, so.
All right, well, first of all, we're not voting for the planning and zoning
Right.
document.
Well, I'm
We're
not gonna vote
voting,
that.
we're
I
voting
understand
to
that. Right.
remove our driveway ordinance to the Board of Selectmen.
I know
We
that.
are the appeal, so these regulations will, I believe, and usually based on, I think what I know, sometimes I may not know exactly, but I believe the P and Z regulations, if they've adopted them, are in place. And whatever they wrote will be in place. And then people would come here to appeal a denial. But I believe those regulations will be in place by planning and zoning because they are driven by their own board, just like ZBA. This board doesn't tell ZBA what to do. So I believe those will be in place, whether or not we remove our driveway ordinance regulation 222 or not.
So if we left our ordinance in place, how would it work? They go to P and Z, and if they don't get what they want there, then they could still come here, or they have to come here as well because the ordinance is in place?
Well, when you did your driveway, if I remember correctly, because there was like 5 of them in a row, we're the ones that say, okay, you need to make the slope regulation. We gave you a, I don't know,
Variance.
well, we didn't give them a variance, we just said, okay, so you can waive that regulation for your
Right.
driveway. So we would still be, if we kept this ordinance, we would still be in the position to waive whatever they said, but then again, this board would be making those decisions, because I believe those regulations, if they voted on them and put them in place, are in place.
I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know how they would be able to, because the ordinance requires people to come here, so if we don't remove it, they could potentially have to do this and still come to us, which now we're actually making this worse than it was.
Yes, that's what I'm,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. So,
I mean, any mechanism to change this document at this point would be, I don't know, we can't tell P and Z what to do. We'd have to go and,
but there is a mechanism on P and Z to ask for a regulation change.
right,
There are mechanisms to do that.
right.
Other discussion?
So, one last thing. It
Okay.
would seem to me then, playing devil's advocate, we could vote to remove our ordinance and still pursue changing this document at P and Z through the mechanisms available.
Right.
And take some of the burden off of the public in the meantime to have to do both.
Yes.
Yes, good point.
If that's the case, then I'm okay with that.
Anything else? All in favor of the removal of ordinance 222? 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2. 5-2. Ordinance is removed. Item 13, citizens' comments. We have no citizens in attendance for comments. Item 14, selectmen's comments and reports. I'll start. I'd like to thank the fire department for another successful Gator Parade, as well as thanking the Daughters of the American Revolution, the VFW Post 296. and all the veterans and volunteers who made Wreaths Across America successful last Saturday. There were 516 wreaths laid at the graves of soldiers at Forest V Cemetery. Other selectmen?
I'll go next. Remember the real reason for the season. Hold your family close, because you never know what's gonna happen around the corner. I've experienced some pretty tragic stuff as of late. Also, to thank Terry for all the hard work for the Korean and the Vietnam veterans. Welcome home to all of those veterans that didn't get the right welcome when they came in, and to the Wreaths Across America for that. It's been a pretty busy month or so, December has. I just want to say that there's a new year coming up, and this is also a new board here. We have 4 new members and 3 that have been around for a long time, so I know I'm counting on the experience of the other 3 board members to help us through, especially with budget season coming. And we also have to remember that we have to get a new town manager. And not that I think Bob is doing a great job, but that's what we have to decide in the next year. So that's pretty much it from me.
Anyone else?
I have spent the last several days contemplating my comments this evening, and I've really kind of gone back and forth on how to address it, and I had 2 choices: either ignore it or put it in record on our board. And I felt to not put it on record in our board would be disingenuous and send the wrong message to the constituents of this town. It has to go on record that at the December 12th Board of Education meeting, it was discussed about rescinding the vote for officers. And also, as part of that section of the meeting, several minutes were spent reading into their record Freedom of Information Act text messages that came from Selectwoman Perez to not one, but multiple members of the Board of Ed members while they were shortly after the first vote. These messages indicated dissatisfaction with the result, and utilizing a technicality, Selectwoman Perez encouraged a second vote, which of course changed the results. She also communicated with a very new Board of Ed member, indicating her dissatisfaction with the results and placing potential pressure on him to change that vote. It is clearly inappropriate for sitting selectmen to have any influence over other boards in terms of their election of officers. And I believe this matter should be turned over to our Ethics Committee once we have seated them for further investigation and potential discipline of this issue.
Other selectmen?
Yes, I will address all of that, but probably not right now. I would encourage you to read the ethics rules, and you will find that it's probably not in there because ethics rules that we have to do with money. You have described things not completely as accurately as you think you have. So there's a lot of things to say about that, and mostly, I'm just so interested in why you all seem to need to do this so many times. It was done at the Board of Ed meeting, you're doing it again here. There are all sorts of things that happen, but not in the way that you think they happened, and not with the intentions that you think happened.
Candy, I wish I wasn't actually having this discussion, because
Yes,
it's not a positive for anybody on this board, but
Right, so we will talk about the reasons as to what happened, why I was in the place where I was that night, including some of the actions by the very members on this board and very members of your committees that caused this to come up in the first place, et cetera. So I will answer your accusations. And it's not what you think it is, and it's not what you're portraying it to be.
The transcripts are the transcripts, Candy, and I'm not here to be judge and jury on you whatsoever.
Well, yes, you
I'm
are.
simply,
Yes, you
no,
are.
I'm simply entering
Well,
into the record.
Why are you doing it, Paul? Why didn't you just talk to me outside? Why didn't you ask me what was happening?
Because
Why didn't you ask me
because it's become-
where I was coming from that night and what was going on that night? Why didn't you ask me that?
It
Why
was-
didn't you ask me what you all did before that meeting? Why didn't you ask me what you all did a couple weeks before that?
Kenny, I'm simply talking about actions taken during a Board of Ed meeting that seemed to be incredibly inappropriate to influence their election. And as a sitting select person,
It had nothing to do with influencing an election.
as a sitting selectwoman, you should know never to be engaged in conversation with another board during their election. That's all. And I'm not the judge and jury. There's a committee for that, not me.
Right,
But I
that
felt,
committee
but I
is
felt
not
to
the
ignore
judge-
it tonight was
the-
disingenuous to the public who has already seen it in the Board of Ed meeting,
Right, so then why are you doing it again here?
because it should be part of our record as well.
Should be part of our record.
Yes.
Well, there may be some other things should be part of the records.
Steve?
Move we adjourn.
All in favor? Unanimous. Our next meeting, January 2nd, Tuesday,